Good morning.
Good morning, it's Lauren Winter.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Good morning. I'm looking at our
everybody.
list. I'm trying to see if everybody's here.
Yeah, we have some. Hey, Patrick.
Good morning.
Let's
Good to see you.
Good seeing you. Looking for.
Tawny. No, we're still waiting for a few. Oh. There's Rose.
You got that Lauren Winters was here, right? By phone?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great.
There's Desiree. Don't see, is Alec here? See. Oh, there he is. Okay. And we're still waiting on Andre. If you want to get started with introductions, I'll check my responses and see if I'll check again and see if Andre's
Yeah,
here. she might be a little bit late.
I'm trying to see. Patrick, if you want to introduce yourself, and Patrick, I had invited Patrick and
Oh, wait, here she is. There we go.
okay. Well, there's still people coming in, I guess. Here we go.
There we go.
But anyway, Patrick, if you want to introduce yourself and let everybody know what you do. Maybe everybody does know you, doesn't know you, but for the sake of the order.
Great. Thank you so much, Rick. Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with you. I'm excited to work on this committee with you all. My name is Patrick Sponsler. I'm the administrator of the Oregon Office for Community Dispute Resolution, which is housed at the U of O School of Law. I work with the legislature for funding for mediation services, restorative justice services, and then work with the network of community dispute resolution providers, the resolution centers all across the state. There's currently 15 of them that serve the state, and support them in their work. So I'm delighted to be here and work with you all.
Good morning. We've also invited Catherine Dalton from Community
Yeah.
Solutions of Central Oregon.
Is she here?
Yep.
Oh, there she is. Okay. Sorry.
Good to finally see your face, Rick. After
Yeah,
all-
no kidding.
all this talking we've done.
A lot of conversations.
I'm Catherine Dalton. I am the Executive Director of Community Solutions Central Oregon, which is one of the dispute resolution centers that is under Patrick's help at the U of O. So we do, gosh, for restorative justice, we're doing a lot. We're really expanding, and we're all Central Oregon. And definitely in the last 4 to 6 months, we have seen a giant uptick in manufactured home issues. So I have harassed Rick and Ken and everybody over there at the MMCRC quite a bit. So I was really excited to be brought into this because I think it's really, really important. So happy to be here and happy to meet you. Happy to finally see you, Rick.
Welcome, welcome. I don't know if there's anyone
Eddie.
else.
Yeah, I was
Eddie.
going to ask maybe Everett if you could introduce Eddie.
Yeah, go ahead, Eddie.
I think you're on mute, Eddie.
I noticed that when I seen it. So I'm Eddie. Some of you may know me. I am working with Clear Result. I'm working with the EIP, Energy Infrastructure Partners, in partnership with Clear Result, Energy Trust of Oregon, Craft 3, and OHCS for their manufactured housing replacement program. So I'm happy to be here.
I'm taking minutes, Eddie, so I didn't know if, can I write down your title?
Program navigator.
And then, Bill, I was wondering if, for these new folks, if you might be willing to kind of go over the history or the just the basics of this committee and how it started and what its foundational purpose is.
Sure. Thanks. Good morning, everybody, and nice to see some new faces here. A new little boost of energy, I think, to this group will be great. We lost a handful of folks during sort of a transition about a year ago, so it's nice to see the numbers back up. So this advisory committee came to be through a House Bill 2896 that passed in the 2019 session. And that bill contained about 5 different things in it that all dealt with manufactured housing under the leadership of Representative Marsh. I worked closely with her on a number of the components of that bill, and this committee was one of them. And the whole goal for this work group was to assemble a group of stakeholders that would be in an advisory role to the department about really, if you look at the actual legislation, I think just about everything but the kitchen sink is listed in there of what our purview could be should we choose to take it on. But a lot of it has to do with parks, it has to do with landlord-tenant issues, resident experiences in parks, but just really to advise the agency on ways to strengthen the use of manufactured housing as an important component of our affordable housing infrastructure, and it's really elevate it and recognize the important role that it plays in our communities, and to promote that. And so we really take on a wide range of things. We quickly kind of got almost as soon as we were formed and functioning between COVID and then the wildfires derailed a little bit and really focused on wildfire recovery for a period of time because so many manufactured homes were lost. And so, but now we're getting back to really focusing on the replacement program outside of wildfires and other ways that we can preserve parks and look possibly to the expansion with new park development too. At least that's something I hope we can put onto the table going forward. So I think I'll stop there, but really, really glad to have some new people. So we can, I guess, why don't we do this for the new folks? Why don't we just do a quick round of introductions for the rest of us too, so you aren't sort of operating in a vacuum as to who we all are. And then Carrie has an agenda that she sent out, and I'm assuming Rick will want to jump into that next. So I'm Bill Van Vliet. I am the executive director of NOAA, the Network for Oregon Affordable Housing. We're a statewide CDFI that finances affordable housing projects. Been around since 1990. And for at least the last 10 years, we've had a very active interest and role in manufactured housing policy. And I've worked on a bunch of pieces of legislation to strengthen and improve the use of manufactured homes, both in parks and outside of parks. Let me just go around. Arthur, how about you next?
Thanks, Bill. Good to see everybody. I'm Arthur Chapel with Business Oregon. We're the State Economic Development Agency and Infrastructure Finance Authority. We don't do a lot with housing, other than sometimes we can fund the infrastructure, water, sewer, and sometimes streets. To go to housing, we do operate a CDBG housing rehab program, which spends considerable money rehabbing existing manufactured homes. But I think my main contribution to this group is that in a prior job, I worked on some manufactured housing repair and replacement programs, specifically with Bill, and getting a lot of TA help from Andre. So it's good to be here and glad to be participating. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Arthur. Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa Rogers. I am the Deputy Director here at CASA, and we have currently 22 ROCs that have varying degrees of needs for things like infrastructure or the replacement of homes, all of those fun little things. And so we've been in this space for a while and are just so encouraged by all the rest of the people that are on this phone and in this community that are interested in continuing to push for the affordability of manufactured housing living. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Lisa. And Tawny, I just saw you pop on your video.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Tawny Reeder, and I'm with Craft 3, and Craft 3 is also CDFI. We have a suite of consumer products and also commercial products, but on the consumer arm, we have a product that finances the replacement of age manufactured homes in partnership with Energy Trust of Oregon. We work with now Eddie and Everett and Energy Trust, Clear Result, to offer that program. And we've approved a handful of projects and completed what'll be our second here pretty quick. And excited to be a part of this group. We've got one more team member with spotty internet, but that's Desiree, if she's able to come on now to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to stay off camera. I'm Desiree Sidoroff, and I've worked with a lot of you leading our consumer lending business unit that has been doing a lot of work in this space for a few years. And even when we don't specifically work on manufactured homes, we do a lot of work with low-income communities, and our other loans that we do for residential homeowners also apply a lot, like energy efficiency and septic system repair and replacement and other things do help a lot of manufactured homeowners too. So we like to understand the big picture so that we can understand how we can fit in and fill gaps and help folks get the support that they need. Thanks.
Thanks, Des. Nancy?
Yeah, hi, I'm Nancy Engelhardt. I'm off camera today. I'm on an iPad. I live in Gresham in a mobile home, so I'm a mobile homeowner, and I'm also on the board of the National Mobile Manufactured Homeowners Association, dealing with the whole scope of the U.S., which is great because we get input from a lot of different areas, everything from federal down to very local. And I'm also now, I actually got involved with city government in Gresham with the neighborhood associations, and I'm president of Powell Valley Neighborhood Association. And in the city of Gresham, we have 11 identified manufactured home parks, which I'm going to focus on because we're pretty under-recognized, and a lot of people don't even know what manufactured home life is like. So that's me.
Great, thanks, Nancy. Andre.
Hi, I'm Andre Tremolay. I'm with, I have a little consulting firm, Common Works Consulting. I'm a manufactured housing researcher in general of affordable housing issues, and I'll say advocate. Been in this field for about, I guess, 15 years.
Great, thank you. Alec?
Hi, Alex Schiebel. I'm the Government Affairs Manager for Umatilla Electric Co-op. We are in Hermiston and Boardman, and our interest in this is that we've worked a program with USDA to get loans. In fact, we're having a ribbon cutting today of our first home replacement. So we've been interested in how state opportunities can piggyback into those offerings, and been working with Bill. Not deeply an expert in the field, but also available, as we hopefully move to the point of communicating to the other consumer-owned utilities. That can be a gateway to the utilities for what we do. So
Great.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks, Alec. And I think with both Alec and Eddie here, and throughout the history of developing the home replacement program, there's this very strong connection to energy efficiency and healthy homes outcomes in the manufactured housing space. There's just tremendous opportunity. Rose.
Good morning, everyone. I work with CASA of Oregon as the director of our Manufactured Housing and Community or Cooperative Development Center. And we are the folks who are helping residents of manufactured housing communities purchase their parks and become resident-owned communities. And as Lisa said, we've developed 22. We have one that we are redeveloping as a result of the wildfires in Talent, Oregon. And then we have right now 3 more parks in the pipeline. We are hearing directly from the residents of these manufactured dwelling parks about concerns that they have. And sadly, we are not able to help all of these community members, but we're doing what we can in our way. So that's what we do.
Great, thanks, Rose. And there's a phone here ending in 3788. Is that somebody who hasn't introduced themselves yet?
This is Lauren Winters. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, yep.
Okay, hi, I'm Lauren Winters. I'm a senior policy advisor with the Oregon Division of Financial Regulation, and we are responsible for the licensing of owners and parks. We also, of course, oversee insurance, and so we're very involved with the wildfire insurance criteria that affected the manufactured homes. We also have are responsible for securities in case people are trying to raise money to, do startups for manufactured homes. And a few years ago, I worked with this group in terms of getting an exemption from the mortgage loan originator licensing requirements. So we as an agency are very involved in manufactured homes and like to keep our thumb on the pulse of what's going on.
Great, thank you. And then I'm not sure if everybody, all the new folks know all the OHCS staff or not. I'll let you all decide if you want to do introductions with your team or not.
Yeah, Carrie, since you're running the show, go ahead and we'll start with Carrie and then Sean and then Everett, then I'll finish it up.
Hi, good morning. I'm Carrie Hodai. I'm the Manufactured Homes Program Manager for OHCS, Manufactured Housing in the Homeownership Division.
Sean?
Hi, I'm Shauna. I'm a program analyst with Manufactured Housing, MMCRC. I'm working with updating the rules and the website. And then working on some RFAs. Everett?
I'm Everett Horvath. I'm the Manufactured Home Replacement Navigator. I just celebrated my first year in this role. So along with Carrie and Rick and Shauna, we've done a lot of work in the last year to revamp our program. And I'm really happy to say we had our first home delivered yesterday that was ordered back in February. So the fruit's starting to ripen, and I'll be getting some windshield time in shortly.
Yeah, Rick Abrego, and I'm Assistant Director for Manufactured Housing, and I also manage the MMCRC program. And like Everett said, it's been I think it's been a great year for us. It's just not on the manufactured home replacement program side, but as Patrick and knows that we've delivered our promise to help the CDRCs with some much needed funds to recoup from COVID, not having a lot of income coming in. So I'm very excited of what we've accomplished. I'm excited for 2023. Hopefully we get funding to continue. With our new governor, you just never know where the wind blows and what's going to be the passion for people. And I'm just really hoping that we get the fundings that we're asking for, along with bills, and try to hopefully change some rules to assist tenants better. I know there's some rental information that's going to try to go out to try to cap rents as they rise so quickly. Seems like manufactured homes are always overlooked in that sense, but I'm excited. I came on board knowing there was a lot of work to do, we got a fantastic, this group is top notch, #1. Couldn't work with anybody better. And I'm excited. They make me look good. I'll always say I am the dumbest person in the room. And these folks make me look very smart. And I just so glad for my hire like that. So it's my team that makes us look good. And I appreciate them all. And welcome to everybody. And then let's cheers to a whole new season of 2023. And hopefully it's a great one. Carrie, I forgot to save my agenda. So if you want to, I'll put that up, or just let me know, or send a copy to myself. And
Sure.
Yeah,
I think this is a good segue into the pipeline. That's the next thing on the agenda.
Well, let's do that. But yeah, and if you want to share, who's sharing are you sharing the pipeline, Carrie?
I can, yeah.
Yeah. Let's do that, and then if Everett wants to chime in on that, and then with the news that where we stand as of yesterday.
Can you guys see that?
Not yet.
Is it up now?
Not yet.
Okay. Why isn't it?
There we go. Something's happening. There we go. Well, that's the agenda.
I'm wanting to share the pipeline. Okay. Let me try that again.
Sure.
There it is. Is that it?
Yep.
Okay. Try to make it bigger so I can see it. I'll just go to the bottom, the highlights. And Excel and spreadsheets are not my strong suit. So I'm gonna just go straight to the highlights of our pipeline. As of the end of this week, we've got a total of 49 homes that are being replaced. 36 of those are wildfire, 13 for the regular program. That's a little over 3.5 million funds committed. Little over 2 million that's been dispersed. That's due to, as Everett said, he hasn't had a lot of windshield time yet. Homes are starting to come out, starting to be delivered. Between wildfire and the regular program, average loan amount for wildfire is about $54,000. The average loan amount for the regular program is about $97,500. Our overall reserve for the program is down to a little over 600,000, which will lead into our news. I don't know if Everett wants to share or if I should share. We're suspending applications now with the remaining reserves that we have. We've got about 4 applications that were in process now. 2 of those, they're all regular program applications. 2 of those are in partnership with Umatilla Electric Co-op. And 2 of those are, one is in Waldport, that's Lincoln County. Am I right? Waldport, Lincoln?
That's further south.
Is that Lane County? And then
yes.
the others, Grants Pass, and I think that's Josephine County. So those 4 that are in process now are gonna take up what's left of the reserves. So we'll be suspending applications for the remainder of this biennium. So, and that's, you know, it's sad to not be able to help more folks, but at the same time, we're pretty proud of that, you know, this type of program, you want to use up every bit that you have and spread it as far as you can. So assuming we'll be refunded, we'll pick it back up in June.
Any questions, anyone?
So in total, that'll be, I'm so bad at math, quick math in my head. That'll be 52 homes for the last funding cycle replaced. Andre?
Are you, does it make sense to keep a waiting list while you're suspending the program? First of all, congratulations on expending the money. Secondly, are there plans, or does it make sense to have a wait list?
And I'll take that because it was that's a great question, because Everett's laughing. I know Everett. Oh my gosh, we had a meeting yesterday and we deliberated on this for quite a long time, and it's one of those double-edged swords, because we don't know if we're going to be funded again. And I know that if I was applying and I say, well, go ahead and apply and we'll create a waiting list. I have from now till June to find out whether or not I got a home. And I know I've been waiting for things, that don't come around. And I'm so disappointed that, it's just crushing, especially when you're talking about a home. So we just decided, and then optics and things, it was just such a tough question to answer. So we just decided, you know what, at this point, what we're asking is we're suspending applications, but if we get funding, this is what you need to do. Please get all this documentation in order for yourselves so that you can apply, because Everett is very clear that it takes 60 days, Everett, for an application. So it takes about 60 days or more, depending on how quickly they can get things together. The average is 60 days to get an application approved. So we just thought, so people just aren't hanging on every waiting. We just thought maybe it's just safer to just say, we're suspending applications, but please prepare, so that at least when it's opened up again, then everyone's ready just to apply, and it'll just go faster. But you see the other side of the spectrum, where it's like, as soon as we know we're going to get funds, then we can start processing. And so I understand both sides, but we just kind of leaned on the other side of that anticipation of almost 5 months of waiting around and just wondering. I don't know, that would be cruel. that'd be terrible on my side, just waiting around, just wondering. So we just decided not to put people through that. And I understand if you disagree, I really do, but we had to make a decision, and this is the one I made on that.
Are you keeping a list of people, not for applications, to accept applications, but just a list of people to notify?
Yeah, we still have a running list that we're doing, yes.
So that's what I was really asking. It's more, not like a go ahead and apply now, because that's a lot of work. It's more, okay, we'll let you know when we do have money. And you
Absolutely.
are definitely
now. I'll just go what I see. Tawny?
I'm curious about with the funding being completely dispersed, what will that mean for you, Everett? And what will your activity be like now until June? How will we be able to work together or not?
That's a good question. I'll preface this by saying I learned a lot this year, right? I mean, and I'm still learning a lot because each replacement is so unique. And I'll give you a prime example. There are a lot of times we'd send out project letters without seeing the full picture. Okay, i.e., certain counties, especially on fee simple, require an easement from the roadway. Okay, and that takes time. Other counties, other building permits take time, and that's kind of just one of the small things that we have to deal with. So although we got, we committed funds to that project, we're still 6 months out, waiting on an easement from Lane County or whatever from Lincoln County. So these projects are taking a lot longer than we anticipated, and because we just didn't know what we didn't know. So what I'll be doing till we get refunded, working the projects that we currently have open.
So I guess I asked that question because, like, if you're receiving inquiries and somebody's like wanting to start the process or something, I'm wondering what that looks like in terms of you being able to help refer them to Craft 3 if you know that they'll need some loan funding, so we could start that process. On
Yeah. So
that's still going to be happening.
Yeah, and so we're still getting I would say 3 to 4 week. So as they're coming in, I screen them kind of first, and I send them a copy of our program guide, and then I set up a follow-up appointment, and that'll weed out the folks that don't want to go through the process, because sometimes it's a long process and it creates a lot of stress on folks. So the ones that I put them on a list, and then I'll say, okay, this is what you need to prepare for when the funding comes available.
Okay.
And
we'll find some time together, I think, offline to talk about what that'll look like during this period. That'll be good.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Bill?
Great, thanks. Not so much questions, just a request for, I think, some information that would be helpful for using for advocacy work at the Capitol for the new funding. And that would be if you can give us a breakdown of how much you've expended for the demolition grants versus the loans. I think just knowing that split would be helpful. And then maybe a little bit of an average. I know averages are really hard, but that's what is, I think, most easily communicated. On breakdown on the home, sort of the replacement cost between demolition, site work, and home, and then installation, so we can get the total cost together. I think that'd be really helpful too. So
yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting and cost it's almost a dartboard. It's rising every month. It's scary rising every month. And now, depending on the age, and Everett, you can back me up on this if someone has questions on that, but we're also running into asbestos issues.
Yep.
So all of a sudden the cost jumps dramatically, and we're limited as to what we can do, how much we can do. It's creating, again, what Everett says, we don't know, we're learning, and it's like, oh my gosh, nobody anticipated that. And it's just, and then with interest rates rising and people not qualifying. And so we're going to have to make adjustments along the way. It's going to be definitely a learning time, but we have all that information that you're looking for, Bill. So between Carrie and Shauna and Everett, we'll get all that to you. Because it's the legislative session, we've been preparing all this anyway, because we're figuring we're going to get questions on that, but we'll get that to you. And just let us know what else you might need, and if we can provide it, we will.
Great, thank you.
Yes,
Rick,
sir.
if I can add to that, I mean,
Absolutely.
one thing I think we're going to have to really be careful with, Bill, is the majority of the homes that we replaced this biennium were wildfire, and so there is no demo cost to that. So
well, maybe
that's
you
just
just
kind of
have two buckets then, right? One that's just regular replacement, and one that's wildfire replacement. And that might even be really important for them to see that too, right?
Right.
So,
and
great,
one last
thanks.
thing is there's a huge cost difference between fee simple and parks, and that's just has to do with the infrastructure. So
We'll break it up for you. Sounds like there'll be a few reports. Arthur?
Yeah, you guys, my question was gonna be what Bill asked. You guys got almost 100% of what I was looking for there. So I was interested in the all-in cost of the replacement and the difference between fee simple and replacements in parks or co-ops. I hadn't thought about the difference for wildfire projects, so I'm glad you brought that up, Everett. And then one other thing you might want to track separately is cost of actually complete projects versus your estimates of projects that are still in progress, right? Because you guys are probably better at this than I was when I was doing it, but there were lots of change orders and unexpected expenses.
Well, and that creates another problem. I'm glad you brought that up, Arthur. We actually left ourselves, I think, unfortunately, we dug below what we wanted to, but I think, you know, I'm just estimating, but I think we're left at about a $245,000 by the time everything's done and we've allocated, and we're using the word very, very lightly, allocated. We left us with about 245,000. And, you know, as you know, that we're okay to be under, but we can't go over. And so we're leaving that because what's happening, our current experience is that at the time they get their estimates, like Everett said, it could be anywhere from 7 to 9 months for delivery. The costs change. So we need that cushion because we allocated it, but delivery costs. And you ever have any questions on exactly what is, please contact Everett. That guy has everything dialed in as to what these costs, what they're charging, well, not so much what you're charging, but just basically what they're charging for. And so by the time when we first allocate, we're assuming this is the cost. They're just like anything under construction, it's always going to be an overage. And so by the time we finish, we may have to add more to the original allocation. But we also have to be careful that we also have our limits. We can only go so much for a single wide and only so much for a double wide. So we have to stay under that limit no matter what. We can't go over. And so that means some owners may need to dig in their own pockets or find more money. So that's the main reason we're keeping that reserve, because we need to fill in these gaps as they show up. And right now they're averaging, what's the average right now, Eric? I want to say 10 to 15, something like that.
In terms of percent on the overage?
Yeah. Or just cost. I mean, if you could put it in, equate it to dollars, that's fine too.
It's hard. I would say it's probably about 10%. So the manufactured home prices have stabilized. Okay. And in some instances, they're actually lowering. However, the construction costs have risen. So a lot of times it's a wash. So I would say about 10% of the cost. And I would say the average cost to replace a single wide is probably 150,000 to 170,000, and replace a double wide is 2 to 250.
And that's the total cost for delivery and setup and everything,
yeah,
correct?
yeah, for a complete project. Yeah.
Right. There you go.
Thank you.
So I hope that helps in understanding what we're facing there.
That does help. Thank you.
Good deal. Anyone else? Okay, Carrie, I guess we'll move on to the next thing.
I'm muted. The next on the agenda is committee appointment sunsets. I think the sunsets were a little while ago. I don't know, March maybe. I think it ties into the advisory committee report was also due in March of 2022. I'm not sure if there was one done in 2022, but there's one coming up again in 2023.
I didn't follow the question.
So the committee needs to, if we're going to be within the advisory committee
Rick, you're muted if you're.
Yes, I was, and I keep forgetting so that, there isn't any ambient noise coming through my, I tend to breathe loud. So I guess, do we have some voting to do anything? I mean, I'm not sure exactly with the MHAC committee exactly what, I know we needed more members. We need to talk about this report. I haven't seen, I don't even know what I'd almost have to look at a report that was sent in, or whatever the last one was anyway, or if there has been one sent in, but I'm not sure exactly what that would consist of. And I almost have to look at that and who's actually even who writes it. So, I mean, this is definitely new to me in this end, because this is our first year into this thing. And so maybe I'll lean on you, Bill, since you were from inception, as well as some others, and you can kind of lead into that. But if you can maybe assist a little bit in what you believe we may need to do in order to continue with this program.
Yeah, it was a pretty simple, at least the only report I think I remember us completing and presenting was to Housing Stability Council.
Right.
And it's probably a couple of years ago now. I mean, it might have been like the first for the first year. I think Chelsea wrote it. And then she and I both went to Housing Stability Council and did a quick overview of what we had worked on to date.
Okay.
So it wasn't super extensive, I don't believe. Hopefully you have a copy of it. I might be able to see.
Yeah, if you could look at it, I'll ask Chelsea. I know she's busy with disaster recovery and that end of it. There's a lot of movement going on there, but we'll look at her old files, maybe.
Right.
Carrie, we'll see what we can find.
Sorry, I was looking for it. The only one I could find was from 2021, and that's
That might be
probably what
it.
you were referring to. And then I was skimming the bylaws and the statute that created the advisory council, and the report is supposed to be submitted to the Housing Stability Council every year. So I think that the committee missed 2022. But I think that since March is rolling towards us pretty quickly for 2023, that we can get back on track by doing a report for 2023. And then if we have a recorded vote for the sunsets, for the committee appointment sunsets from the bylaws, because I think those committee appointment sunsets also occurred in March of 2022. So if we get back on track with those two, I think we'll be
Okay.
sort of back in compliance with the bylaws from the.
Okay. Well, let's share. We'll look at that report, maybe, and then maybe update it, everything, get that over to Bill to take a look at. As far as sunsets, what do we need to address? Do we know? Bill, do you have any idea?
So no, I don't.
Hey, we're on the same page.
It's in the bylaws.
Okay.
So I think I guess the question, I don't know if the director needs to sort of renew terms, or if the director and staff want to rotate people off at the end of those terms. I think that's and I'm not sure if that should be for the committee to decide or staff to decide, but there's probably something there for the director to do, because I know that
I think she approves all the new, hey, you get a congratulations letter saying we acknowledge you as the chairman and so on. I think that's a quick one. I mean, it's a matter of just recognizing who is existing now, and then whether you want to, you know, at this point, if there's someone else that was interested, or we just want to continue. And what is the tenure on that? Is it annually then?
I can pull up the bylaws.
I think they said 3 years for some
Yeah.
reason. Terms were 3 years initially.
Well, so then
Do
you
you
still have
guys-
another year, correct?
I can't remember when we started.
Am I sharing?
2 years,
Yes.
it looks like.
The chair is 2 years, yes.
Yeah.
So I should be
Um,
done.
So members can serve 3 years.
There you
So
go.
it might be time for MSHA to send out new appointment letters.
Yeah, we'll get that out to everybody. And then we have a chair. Is that all we have?
Yeah.
Co-chair? Do we have a co-chair or no?
I don't think we do.
Okay. And well, we have the members here. I mean, I think we could discuss if anyone else was interested in number one, if you're still interested in being chair, or is there someone else that would like to rotate in, and so that you have more capacity to do other things, Bill? I mean, I don't know how many, you're a pretty important guy, so I don't know how many things you're chairing.
I don't know how important I am, and I'm not chairing that many, but I don't need to continue as chair if somebody else wishes to,
Yeah,
to step up.
absolutely. Yeah. I'll just throw it out to the room if you don't mind. I mean, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but would someone be interested in taking over chair?
I'm sure everybody's going to flock to it. 'cause
I
it's
know,
such a-
I can hear it now.
It's such a.
Thinking about turning my camera off.
That's right. Well, that'll just draw attention to you, Arthur.
Do we have to do I have to voluntold here somewhere? No. But
Why
well, I
don't you
tell
let
you what,
people contact you, Rick, if they would be.
yeah, why don't we do that? Please
willing.
let me know if you're interested, and by next, well, I'd like to try to get this done, and we can always send out an email to everyone and to see if someone is, let's do this. If someone is interested in chairing, please let me know.
Oops.
And then what I will do is we could send out an email to everybody saying if there's more than one, these are the people that are interested in chairing, and just let me know who people would prefer. Is that okay?
Yeah, and I'll just say, Rick, it's a really low level of burden. So don't worry about it being a big lift.
Yeah. Okay.
Staff takes care of stuff. So
Yeah, we just we try to make it, realistically, we do most of the work, and it is an advisory committee. There's you're not on the hook for anything, because the process is we all talk about it, and then what we normally do is we take all the suggestions of the committee that we've talked about, and then we take it internally and we discuss it internally in the division with MSHA and all the leaders, and decide what's based on suggestions and advice. We look at what we need to do, but it's not anything that like Bill says is too burdensome. We still need to take it in internally and see what's possible. I always equate it to the architect and the contractor. The architect says, and the big window needs to be here, and the contractor says there's not even a wall there. So, and that's what we do is we'll take your advice and say, yeah, absolutely, I think it's a great idea. But then we take it internally and say, do the bylaws, do the statute, what can we do that still allows us to do certain things? And so that's what we try to do, is balance it all out. But let me know, please. And if we can get it, because we don't meet till March.
March.
So if you guys could, if anyone's interested, please let me know. I would say end of week, maybe next week. I mean, it really wouldn't take much to decide what you'd like to do. If you're new, we'll walk you through it. It's not that big a deal. I mean, again, Bill, you can always ask Bill, but everyone here has a passion for manufactured housing, so you can't go wrong, because our passion is all the same. But I'll leave it at that. And then we'll look at Bill. We'll look at that report and get it to you and see what and then if we have to, and then when we're ready, we'll schedule something we'll put ourselves on the schedule for Housing Stability Council.
Yeah, okay. And we can always look at who's not here and just name them.
Yeah. Woo! Aren't you glad everybody showed up today? Carrie, I guess we'll move on to the next thing. And
would it be helpful if I sent a copy of that 2021 report to everybody?
Yeah, let's do that.
Everybody want a refresher on that?
Please.
Okay. I'm muted.
Yes, you are.
Bill has a legislative update, I think. Time permitting. And we've got time now.
Yeah, I didn't, wow.
Oh,
I wasn't prepared.
Connie, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
So yeah, I just wanted to let this group know, and we can spend more time on it in March. I don't think anything's going to happen immediately through the legislature, but there has been for years now, several years, work group focused on manufactured housing and manufactured home park development opportunities around specific barriers and trying to propose legislation to break down barriers. And we've also reached into sort of landlord tenant issues and solving some problems there. And this has been convened with Representative Marsh, who has, I think you all know from the beginning, been a very tireless advocate for manufactured housing and residents in parks. So I'll just kind of run through. We have two bills that we are putting in. They're not printed yet, so I can't give you a bill number. They're just being finalized. One is a set of policy recommendations and changes, and one is a set of funding requests related to manufactured housing. The policy bill, I'll rattle those off, and I won't go into great detail. I'm happy to share with you. If anybody's interested, let me know. But there has been with park reconstruction following wildfires, there have been questions by constituents raised to Representative Marsh about what residents are required to pay for when they move in for the first time to a new park. And investor owners of parks have required that residents, as a part of moving in with a new home, pay for and install improvements that really feel like they are not related specifically to the home, but more to the park. And so this piece of legislation is to provide clarity on what landlords can and cannot require new park residents to pay for when they move in with a new home, and put some boundaries around that. There was a bill, and this was at the request of John Van Landingham, who's been a part of the work group in 2019, Senate Bill 586, having to do with types of legal assistance and dispute resolution. And I guess I don't know, Patrick, if this goes through your shop or not, but maybe it doesn't. But there just needs to be some technical fixes around the clarity of the things that they can and cannot address, and it also extends the sunset of that. Another issue that surfaced with Representative Marsh's constituents moving into parks following wildfire, so these are newly constructed parks, is landlords requiring 3-to-1 income to rent ratios. And that is a pretty high ratio for most lower income residents. And what it's done is it has effectively screened out any senior or disabled residents who are on fixed incomes from being able to secure housing. Many of those had been park residents in the past and now can't get back into a park that's been newly reconstructed. The other consequence, interestingly enough, is for folks who are in parks that didn't burn, are having a difficult time selling their homes in some cases because it's a seniors only park, but with these new income to rent ratios, there aren't enough residents to qualify. So it's devaluing the home value in those parks. So we're recommending that for seniors and disabled be capped at a 2-to-1 ratio. And so we can broaden the eligibility. We expect pushback from landlords on both of those landlord issues, by the way. We are proposing to expand, as some of you may or may not be familiar with Senate Bill 8 that passed in 2021, which opened up, it limited the ability of folks to object under land use laws to new affordable housing developments on certain types of properties. And essentially eliminated some of the NIMBYism that was happening in our communities. And what we are asking to do is to expand the definition of affordable housing to include new manufactured home parks that are owned by co-ops or nonprofits or housing authorities, because manufactured home parks are routinely discriminated against by NIMBYs as they come in. We want to ask DLCD to develop model codes for jurisdictions to upgrade their manufactured home park development codes, because many of them are stuck in 1970 and have not been touched since then. We are asking for some additional money to go into the OHCS Manufactured Home Park Acquisition Fund program, which you've been operating through CDFIs. And we also want to expand the eligible use of those resources. And Rick, I did go over these with Nicole and Alexandra earlier this week. I'll get this out to you. To let those acquisition resources also be used for new park development, in addition to park preservation acquisitions, so that we, really, one of the things I am really hopeful for is that we can get more co-ops and nonprofits developing new parks coming out of the chute, and we need resources to do that. And then on the funding side, the separate LC, if I can find where that is, here it is. It is, I think the department already, out of their request, their budget ask for preservation includes a set aside for park preservation. We're just reinforcing that in this bill, saying, yes, we need that. We want an opportunity to make that case separately, but it'll all roll into the department budget. We're pegging that amount, though, at 35 million, just based on conversations that we know for what exists in pipelines already. So that maybe, I think, is a little more than what the department proposed, but we'll let folks sort that out. And then we would like, in addition to the preservation money, for $10 million to be dedicated specifically for new park development gap investments, because we know, just like preservation of parks, they can't be affordable if you have to pay the full cost of new development. And then again, putting more money into those acquisition funds. So that's the two different groups of proposals. So it's a real mixture, especially on the policy side, of addressing a lot of different things in one bill, and we'll just have to see where all that goes. And then the money is going to be tough this year. We know that going in. Rick?
Just a quick question on that. How am I saying this? Because the funds live in, some of the funds live in affordable rental housing. When you're saying 35 million, is that the affordable rental housing end of that?
Yes.
Okay. And then in that, then the additional 10 million, I know you mentioned two sets of 10.
Yeah.
So one lives in our end, the other one lives in the other side also? Then?
Yeah, I guess I'm not, maybe I'm not totally
you're not
sure
clear
on how
okay.
the agency is going to end up sort of sorting out how all that gets administered. We just want the money to be available for the public.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't think we have a stake in which side of the agency it goes to.
Yeah. Now, does that, because originally we had funds that went to CDFIs, is that in, because it doesn't look like anything set aside for that. So
one of the
10 million.
there's 10 million to continue to increase that allocation, and then there's 10 million for new park gap financing.
Okay.
Separately, that's agency.
Gotcha.
So some for each of those buckets.
All right, sounds great. Thank you.
Yep. Lisa, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was actually just wondering if any of y'all, and maybe this isn't the space, and it's probably in the multifamily side that we really need to do it, but since Bill has brought up the idea of asking for 35 million, there is money from the federal government that just came out. It's under the Price Act or something that's going to provide $225 million to be available for an intermediary to go ahead and help with acquisition of manufactured home parks, but it'll be nationwide. And so they're going to be, I think, putting out, I don't know if the RFP has come out already, but I was thinking, I know that Rock USA is going to be asking for some of that funds, but I think states as well will be. And I was wondering, since OHCS has got such a robust program, to make sure that they are aware of this opportunity and potentially be able to access those resources so that we don't have to, at least if the legislature doesn't have any funding, we'd still be able to convert these parks to resident ownership. And so I just bringing that to the table, that it's here, and trying to figure out who the appropriate person at OHCS to speak to about that. I'm guessing it's probably Natasha, but I don't know, to see if OHCS is willing to actually go after some of that funding for Oregon.
Yeah, I think that's super appropriate to bring up, Lisa, and I would second that encouragement for the agency to look at an application. And I'm sure Lisa Casa is going to look at it, and we'll look at it, and Rock USA will look at it, and everybody under the sun will look at it. So, but the more applications, the better when they finally come out.
Exactly.
Any other questions? Sorry, I took more time than I expected to, but there were a lot of different threads in there. And obviously when these get filed and have hearings, we would welcome any participation in testimony on any of those subject matters, whether it's written or in person. And it maybe at the March meeting, we could think about if this group wants to make a formal recommendation in support or not. So I think that would be helpful.
Just a quick note in the chat, Andre has put the last report in 2021 that you can download.
I'm glad to see the change, or I hope it goes through, the change or update for the or clarification for the residents being charged for infrastructure when they're placing in parks. That's come up, and in MMCRC gets called about it all the time. It's come up for our wildfire folks. And some of the fees have been just through the roof.
Bill, how are you guys thinking about those fees in comparison to things like system development charges that a city might charge? How do you respond to the claim that they're the same sort of fee?
So system development charges, we very clearly call out and say that they can't be passed through. And the logic there is that is a cost of operating the park. That's a one-time charge from a jurisdiction, and then it will last forever. And it shouldn't be the burden of just that initial occupant in that particular space. But other costs are usually things that are identified, street lamps that happen to be located in front of a house, certain sidewalks that go in front of a house, things like that are really more park amenities. We didn't go so far as to say that they couldn't require a driveway, for instance, but for the most part, it's sort of like, if you can't pick it up and take it with you when you leave, you shouldn't be forced to pay for it.
Let me refine my question a little bit, because I think it might be something you get from some park owners. Things like street lamps and sidewalks are things that are often covered in city system development charges, right? And the park owner might say, I have to pay for these amenities just like a city does. And the fee, the infrastructure fee I'm charging this client is similar to what a city might charge in system development charges, but it's my internal infrastructure inside the park. It's just a comparison I can see being made.
Well,
Yeah,
and
go
that's
ahead.
true. The meters, you know, what they, you know, they used to, they would have one meter that would serve the entire park, right? And then I think the cost of the water got too big, so they sub-metered, and then they charged the residents for the sub-metering and then billed them individually. So I think there's precedent that it already occurs, but it seems like we should probably do something to fight against that, because it seems, I agree with you, Bill. If you can't take it with you, it should be the park owner's responsibility and not be passed on to the residents. That just doesn't seem right. They make so much money off of these poor residents already. It's like, cough up some of your earnings, dude, and do the infrastructure. That's why you have people living in the park. You're leasing a space to them. You got to cover that cost. And I don't know. If maybe for next legislative session or something, we think about putting something forward that would limit their ability to just take those costs and just pass them right on to the resident in some fashion. I know their argument, and yet it doesn't seem right because they make so much money off of these parks. They shouldn't, I don't know, they should have some responsibility, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's, and I could just jump in just with one thing, is that's where the unfortunate disconnect is between coming from their federal rental housing side, where I managed a lot of these large projects, you know, for apartments. And, you know, you never saw an owner charge their renters for the lamps, the street lamps, and all these amenities that they don't get charged for that. They just pay rent. And, you know, and so it's just part of the project. It's part of the program. And, but in parks, all of a sudden it's, I need to charge you for that because that's what it's costing me. That's where the disconnect ends up. And even in the rental, a lot of the rental statutes and laws, there's a disconnect between parks and just regular rentals, and the rules don't apply. They're almost separately, and if you don't write it, it doesn't exist. And so that's where you get silly things like that tree's in your space, so now you're responsible for that tree to cut it down or do whatever, but it's still the parks, you know, the owners benefit if the tenant does it and charges for it and is charged for it. So it's silliness like that, but I totally agree with you, Lisa and Bill, that, you know, some of these things just need to be addressed at some point.
Just clarity above, you know, for if nothing else, clarity about who has that burden will be helpful. I think, Arthur, you know, just getting back to your question, the way I would think about it, if somebody got up and said that, is, you know, one of the benefits of a park is that you have different infrastructure requirements than you do if you're a public subdivision. And the park owner owns that infrastructure. And so, you know, passing on the cost of a privately owned piece of infrastructure to a tenant, you know, seems inappropriate to me. So I think that if I was asked the question, that's how I would probably respond to it. Looks like Kat put something, an example of something.
I think Andre had a question.
Oh, well, hi, Andre.
Just a quick thing. Patrick, pardon me for maybe putting you a little bit on the on the spotlight or whatever. But I mean, you hear a lot of complaints, as does Kat, from residents about landlord tenant issues, and may have a sense of some that are systemic, that would have to do with changing the law
or a need to change a law. And I know we would all love caps on rents and like 80 million things like that. But I'm wondering if there are any that you think rise up to maybe raise, if not this year, in a future year, for potential legislative consideration, if you guys might be a source of information. So anyway, I just wonder if you have any ideas now, or that's it.
All right. So Andre, I didn't catch the end of that. Was that a question directed to me, or was it?
No, I'm sorry if I'm not coming through. I was asking Patrick and Kat in particular if they had any issues that they thought required legislative action now or in the future. And sorry, I had to change microphones, and so I guess I'm not very loud. My apologies.
Thanks for the question, Andre. I will just offer that in my office, I see service data. I don't see case data. And so I don't have that review. I love your question though, because it sounds like what you're asking is kind of an ombuds model where you're looking for trends in the conflicts that might be created by policy or law or whatever. And I think that would be incredible. And in my sense is that at OHCS, that's where they're receiving a lot of that data, and that's where I see that role as being very influential. Outside at the centers, the 15 centers do varying degrees of these or varying volumes of cases, and so you're going to see different pockets around the state. But I think what we really need is a statewide perspective, and so that's I think that information. I'm not sure how much case data is going to housing or MMCRC. For those, I think that there's pieces in there, but that would be a question I would push back for them to say, is that coming into your office? Are you able to do a kind of a trend analysis on the conflicts that are coming through?
And I'll jump on that real quick. Yes, and yes. One of the goals I have for 23 is to bring some of these issues forward and discuss these types of rules that are burdening tenants, and then discuss it not only in the dispute and resolution committee, but also with MHAC, and saying, this is the rules we'd like to change. These are at least the most common problems, and these are the rules we'd like to change. What do you guys think? But that's one of my goals for 23. So I'm glad somebody brought that up. But that's I just want to do better in 23 to serve better, and actually be part of the change. And when some of these, Andrea, that you're bringing up that are constant issues, it's something that it only makes sense to change it. Why are we still talking about it? So these are the things, that's my goal, is one of these things, to bring it forth and let's discuss it. Is it something we need to do? How do we do it? And then move forward in the rulemaking. But yes, we will be addressing that. But thank you, Andrea, for bringing that up. And I think Nancy had a question also, and I think we have about 15 minutes left, so we want to make sure we cover other things. But Nancy?
Yeah, well, since the coalition disbanded, we don't have that avenue to request bills, and so we really need to get on top of this, because there's a lot of issues that are at the forefront of a lot of manufactured home owners that need to be addressed. And so I don't know, I guess I'd really like to get involved in how we're going to get the attention of the legislators to, at least hear us and try and get some bills passed this year. Anyway, that's all I got to say.
So I think if we can move forward, because like I said, I don't know how much is left on the agenda, Carrie.
Rick, if I could just jump in real quick, just follow up. I just wanted to offer, you may be doing this on the DRAC, the Dispute Resolution Committee, but if you are going to be doing some analysis of the conflicts, they're very well equipped to be able to help support that. And or if you're doing something that's a little bit broader, I bet you would find one of the CDRC folks might would support you, especially if there was some other grant funding to serve in that ombuds role or to serve in that sort of that analysis role. So just wanted to toss that
All
idea.
right, thanks. Carrie?
That is the end of our agenda.
Hey, look at that. Wow, we actually finished one.
Switching to 90 minutes is
Yeah.
I think has been helpful because we
Deal.
actually made it through an agenda. I'm proud of our committee.
Yeah. Well, let me just kind of finish that last conversation then. This is something we're bringing forward just in discussion so that we can move forward and try to look for and create some change. Rules, we can change rules at our level, and it's just a process. It's a long process, but we can make rule changes. But we want to, and it doesn't take bills in order for us to do that. But we want to discuss it. We want to be cognizant of everyone's thoughts, and we want to bring in everyone. We want your input, so that we, whether we have to make slow changes or big change. I mean, it's totally, I want to discuss both the Patrick in the DRAC and then also in the MHAC, so that we're all on the same page as to what we're trying to accomplish, so that it's all up front and just full transparency of what we're trying to accomplish. And a lot of it is just mainly to assist our tent and just make it better. For right now, and you may not be aware on the MHAC side, but definitely on the DRAC side, there's a lot of new investors coming in and buying these manufactured parks and realizing there's a lot of money to be made in these. They're trying to bring in better, or what they would consider more affluent renters, and trying to, they're just finding every opportunity to take advantage, just to make more money. Really, it just comes down to making money, and I get it. People need to make money, but not at the sake of tenants and so on. And unfortunately, there's a lot of tenant landlord rules when it comes to regular rental units that are brick and mortar, and somehow there's a disconnect when it comes to manufactured housing parks and so dwelling parks. And so it's something we need to address. And so as we move forward, you guys will start seeing in the agenda what we'd like to discuss and how we want to make some rule changes and move along, and in conjunction with the other things that we'll be doing. But again, this is why I'm excited, and I'm excited to hear all this conversation, because it does fall in line with the goals that I have. But that's all I really have to say. And but Bill, go ahead, and if you want to take over on that.
No, I guess I just want to follow up on that and say that I think this is one of the reasons we need to build more parks that are owned by co-ops and nonprofits, because the best thing we can do is increase the opportunities people have to choose where they live. And if they're living in spaces owned by mission-oriented owners, they're going to be much better off, and that will take some of the wind out of the sails of the investor owners. The way we've been doing it for the last 10 years, we're fighting over the same pie. We need to make the pie bigger so that the relationship isn't so one-sided going forward. And it's good home ownership opportunities.
Oh my gosh, especially now. You're
there's
absolutely
so many
right.
reasons to do this. Absolutely.
I think that's overlooked is, it's definitely less expensive. We'll say it's still expensive when you're looking at the numbers that Everett is talking about, but it's certainly not, at the cost of a single family dwelling at the rate that they're growing. But but I mean, that's our goal. I believe we're all on the same mission to make it better. And that's really our goal. I just encourage the group. I need to send out new letters, like Carrie says, get MSHA to sign them all for Patrick and all our new members will get letters out. Please let me know if you're interested in chairing the committee. If you think of things that you believe we need to discuss in the group, please send in your suggestions to Carrie, and we can contact you and get a little bit more information so we can put it on the agenda. Thank you, Bill, for bringing us up to date on all these. We've seen some of those, by the way. We have to look at those also. So what the bills that you had mentioned, we've been actually looking at them. We're part of the review just to kind of see what we think. But thank you for bringing that up, and it's continued. I appreciate all the continued work you do on that. I'm hoping and whatever pressure, Bill, you can do to make sure we or your partners so that we can continue with the funding for replacement and everything else. I mean, I think when it comes down to it is all it takes is for us to meet someone who had their home replaced and realize what an impact it is. It's that whole starfish thing, you know, when the kids throwing starfish back into the sea and they said, why are you doing it? There's thousands of them on the beach. He goes, well, it's important to this one. So, and I think it's the same thing with our owners that, you know, one home is important. Some people may say that well, it's only 54 homes, you didn't do enough. Well, those 54 families are sure grateful that they got a home again. And that's kind of the attitude we need to take to that, is saving one home at a time. It's still saving one home at a time. It's still a owner getting their home back or getting it improved. In fact, we just ran and I'll end with this, and then if anybody has anything else to interject. But yesterday I got an email of a gentleman that is being evicted because his home is so in disrepair that it's going to cost $75,000 to fix it. And they asked me, can you help? I said, not anymore. But the problem is that he's out of time. Yeah. You know, he had to get it fixed a while back, and this would take us, even if he bought a home, it'd take 7 to 9 months to deliver, and it's not going to help. And it's that type of thing where if they would have known we had the program earlier, we could have at least got him on the program. And that's what breaks my heart, is when we're seeing someone losing a home because they just didn't know about our program. And so these are the other things that if we do get, we want to talk about marketing, but we really can't until we know whether or not we have the funds or not. And this is where we have to then make sure that everybody knows that this program exists. You know, the greatest thing would be is that we're oversubscribed for next year, you know, use all $8 million. But anyway, I'll digress and leave you at that. It's 10:27.
Wait, Rick,
go ahead. Yeah.
In the chat, Desiree brought up a good point for future discussions, I think, and particularly before our next meeting, having current and relevant data for a reference point to give perspective on the needs and urgency for everybody in the group to participate in the discussion and give their input and recommendations. So again, I'll send it out. I'll try to send it out like I did this time, at least a week, if not, you know, 2 weeks before the meeting. And it will, the pipeline won't be changed for the next meeting since we're out of funds. So it'll give us time to put together the other data about the average costs and the you know, difference between the cost of the home and the cost of the demolition and placement and stuff. Demographic data, yes, to an extent. If it's completed, there is demographic data on our application. It's not always filled out, but to an extent, yes.
I got to remember that demographics is a personal choice to fill out, and it's not a mandatory. We can't make them fill it out, and so if they choose to fill it out, they will. And but I also want to let you know that Carrie will be out next week. So if you send an email to her, it may bounce back that she's out, but she'll take care of that. But please feel free, if you have any questions on costs, placement, talk to Everett. He is our expert on that, subject matter expert. He knows all the numbers. He's in contact with all the applicants, so he knows. He's in contact with the manufacturers. He's in contact with a lot of these contractors. He sees all the costs, so you can always pick his brain. Sean is always available to assist in getting you information. And then I'm always available. Please, if you have any questions, we want to make sure that we answer your questions. And but please feel free to contact us anytime. And we have some stuff that we owe you. We'll get all that out. And again, if you leave this meeting and you have questions, please let us know.
Yeah, if you have any before and after pictures of replacements, that would be really powerful.
We're working on that.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Bill, we got our first after yesterday, so.
Yeah. And then what they have to do is they have to sign a waiver. So we got to get all that, you know how it is. But once we get all that, yes, absolutely. We want to provide this, you know, but we're excited about it. So we'll let you know. And as soon as we can, they've signed the waiver. We'll make sure and task Everett with getting the pictures so that we can send them out to everybody. Is that okay?
In the chat, Desiree said they have from the replacement from last year. Tawny and ETO have some.
Oh, great. All right. Well, it's 10:20, it's 10:30. It's time to go, everybody. Unless you have anything else. I mean, I'll turn it over to you, Bill.
Nothing from me. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
All
you.
right, thanks.